So, the UK government has just dropped a major new plan to completely overhaul its asylum system. It was published on November 17, 2025, and it's called Restoring Order and Control. Now, this document promises some of the biggest changes we've seen in decades. So in this explainer, we're going to break down exactly what's on the table, what the government is proposing, and why they say it's so necessary.
To really get why the government is pushing for such urgent, sweeping reforms, you have to start with this number, £9 million. According to their own policy paper, that was the peak cost to taxpayers every single day just for asylum hotels back in 2023. And that figure, well, it's the foundation of their entire argument that the current system is just financially unsustainable.
Okay, so before we dive into the solutions, let's take a look at how the government actually defines the problem. They're painting a picture of an asylum system that's under immense pressure, one they believe is failing pretty much everyone, from the public to genuine refugees.
This quote, right from the Home Secretary's foreword, really sets the tone for the whole document. The government isn't just framing this as some logistical challenge. No, they're calling it a fundamental crisis of fairness and control, one they argue has completely eroded public confidence in the system.
And here, the policy paper points to a really stark contrast. In 2024, at the same time asylum claims were actually falling across the EU by about 13%, they shot up here in the UK by 18%. The government is using this data to argue that the UK has become a real outlier, a uniquely attractive place for asylum seekers in Europe.
Now, this is a point the government is really keen to make. This issue is not just about small boats. While those channel crossings are, of course, the most visible part of the story, at 39%, look at this. A very similar number, 37% of claimants actually arrived here legally on other visas and then applied for asylum. So this data really challenges the idea that this is solely about irregular arrivals.
All right, so with the problem laid out, what about the solutions? Well, the first part of the government's plan focuses on what they call pull factors. Basically, all the things they believe make the UK such an attractive destination in the first place. The goal here is pretty straightforward: reduce that attraction.
And this, right here, is arguably the single most fundamental shift in the entire policy. The government is proposing a brand new status called core protection. It's a huge move away from offering permanent settlement. As you can see, the initial leave to remain is cut from 5 years down to just 30 months. And get this, the path to actually settling here for good gets extended from 5 years to 20. And in another crucial change, any automatic rights for family members to join them would be gone.
The support system is also in for a massive overhaul. The government wants to change the laws so they no longer have a legal duty to provide support, but instead a discretionary power. You see the difference? It means they could deny support to people for not complying. The plan would also make people with assets contribute to their costs and, this is a big one, end the use of hotels altogether, moving asylum seekers to large sites, including military bases.
Now we get to the second major pillar of this policy. You know, it's one thing to try and deter new people from coming, but what about those whose claims have already failed? Well, this whole section is about how the government plans to dramatically ramp up the number of removals from the UK.
It's a fair question, right? If someone has no legal right to be in the country, why aren't they just removed? Well, the policy paper tackles this head-on, and it identifies several key barriers that they believe are gumming up the works.
So, according to the government, these are the main roadblocks. They're pointing to a slow, completely backlogged appeals system. They're pointing to how human rights laws like Article 8 are applied. They also talk about what they call the misuse of modern slavery protections. And on top of that, they cite a lack of cooperation from other countries on taking people back and a general reluctance here at home to remove families.
So to fix that appeals backlog, the plan is to create a whole new system, and it's built around one simple idea: a single, final appeal. The whole goal is to speed things up and to prevent what the paper describes as claimants using application after application just to frustrate their removal from the country.
Okay, so Article 8. This is a really key legal concept from the European Convention on Human Rights. The government is basically arguing that the balance has gone wrong, and that this right to family and private life is being used too often to stop removals. So their plan is to pass new laws that tell the courts, hey, you need to give more weight to the public interest in immigration control when you're making these judgments.
So, we've covered the plans to deter arrivals and speed up removals. Now the policy paper turns to its vision for the right way for refugees to come to the UK. This last section is all about what these new, safe and legal routes would actually look like.
The core idea here is one word: control.
The government wants to completely shift away from a system where people arrive and then claim asylum to one where the UK decides in advance exactly how many refugees it's going to accept each year through very specific managed routes.
So what would this new model actually look like? Well, it's got a few key parts. There'd be an annual cap on numbers set by the government. The main way in would be through community sponsorship, where local groups help refugees resettle. The plan also proposes new, capped routes for refugee students and skilled refugees to come here for work, while still trying to keep some flexibility to respond to sudden global crises.
So as we start to wrap this up, it's worth coming back to the title of the paper itself, Restoring Order and Control. Because really, everything we've talked about, from temporary protection to a new appeals process, is all designed to achieve that one overarching goal. And this final quote from the document really sums up the government's entire argument. They're contending that these really tough new measures aren't some retreat from generosity. Instead, they're arguing that these changes are the necessary first step to maintain public consent for having an asylum system at all. So there you have it. The government has laid out a really detailed blueprint to reduce arrivals, increase removals, and control legal entry. But, as with any massive policy overhaul like this, the central question, the one everyone's asking, remains, will it actually work as planned? And what are the consequences going to be? That's the thought we'll leave you with. Thanks for tuning in.